Have you ever wondered why, no matter how much effort you put into relationships, people keep drifting away from your life? Why the more you grow, mature, and become aware, the lonelier the path seems to get? What if this isn't rejection at all, but protection? In this video, you'll uncover powerful truths about women who walk alone, and why, in many cases, God Himself removes people from their lives, not as punishment, not as abandonment, but as part of a higher purpose that only becomes clear when you're ready to see it. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why this separation happens, what it reveals about your spiritual strength, and how this season of solitude is actually preparing you for something greater. If you've ever felt different, misunderstood, or set apart, as if your life is being guided in a direction others can't follow, this message will connect the dots and show you exactly why watching until the end may change how you see your entire journey. Before we go deeper, take 1 second to connect with this message. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment, "I understand," if this season of solitude has ever spoken to your soul. This simple action helps this message reach other women who need to hear it. And it also signals that you're ready to receive what comes next. Truth 1 begins with something few women are ever told directly, but many feel deeply in silence. When a woman starts to walk alone, it is rarely because she failed to love, connect, or give enough. It happens because her inner growth begins to disrupt the emotional comfort of the people around her. Growth creates contrast. Awareness creates friction. When a woman starts seeing clearly, setting boundaries, and aligning with a deeper sense of purpose, her presence alone becomes confronting. Without saying a word, she exposes what others are avoiding within themselves. This is why the distancing feels sudden and confusing. One day, conversations flow, laughter feels natural, and connection seems stable. Then, without a clear explanation, something shifts. Energy changes, responses become colder, invitations stop. God allows this not as rejection, but as protection. The separation begins the moment your evolution no longer matches the emotional capacity of those walking beside you. And here is the loop most women miss. The pain of being left behind is often the confirmation that something powerful is being formed within you, something that cannot survive constant emotional interference. When God removes people, He is not emptying your life. He is reducing noise. Many women who walk alone notice that solitude arrives right after a moment of clarity, healing, or inner awakening. Maybe you finally forgave someone, released an old pattern, or decided you would no longer shrink to be accepted. That decision, even if made quietly, alters your frequency. People who benefited from your silence, your availability, or your emotional labor begin to feel displaced. They may not know why they pull away, but their nervous system senses change. God understands this before you do. He creates distance so your growth can stabilize without being questioned, criticized, or diluted. If everyone stayed, you would be constantly explaining yourself, defending your choices, and doubting your intuition. This is why the removal feels unfair at first. You think you're losing support, when in reality you're being spared distraction. And the deeper truth is this: if God didn't remove them now, you would eventually abandon yourself to keep them comfortable. Many women internalize this season as failure. They replay conversations, analyze their words, and wonder what they did wrong. But this truth reframes everything. Nothing went wrong, something went right. The loneliness is not proof of being unlovable, it is evidence of becoming uncontainable. God often separates women before they fully understand why, because understanding comes later. At this stage, obedience matters more than clarity. If you knew everything in advance, you might resist the process. You might try to hold on, compromise, or negotiate your growth. So instead, God allows confusion to coexist with protection. You feel alone, but you are guided. You feel unseen, but you are being preserved. And this is where the mental loop deepens. The very people you miss now are the same ones who would have limited the version of you that is emerging. Sit with that, because it changes how you interpret every goodbye you didn't choose. Walking alone also reveals something uncomfortable but necessary. Not everyone wants to grow, and not everyone wants to grow with you. Some people only feel safe when you remain predictable, accessible, and emotionally available on their terms. When you begin to require depth, honesty, and alignment, those dynamics collapse. God removes these people because they are attached to who you were, not who you are becoming. And if they stayed, you would constantly feel torn between loyalty to others and loyalty to yourself. This is why women who walk alone often feel a strange mix of grief and relief. You miss the connection, but you breathe easier without it. That emotional contradiction is not weakness, it is confirmation. God is teaching you to trust peace over familiarity. And the more you honor that peace, the clearer your discernment becomes. This truth sets the foundation for everything that follows. Because without this initial separation, the next phases of your purpose cannot unfold. Another layer of this truth is timing. God removes people before the expansion, not after. Most women expect support to arrive before the breakthrough, but often the opposite happens. First comes isolation, then elevation. First comes silence, then clarity. First comes loss, then alignment. This is because growth requires space, emotional space, spiritual space, mental space. If your life was still crowded with opinions, expectations, and emotional demands, you would not hear the guidance meant for you. God removes people so you can hear yourself again. And once you hear yourself, you begin to hear Him more clearly. This is where many women look back and realize the separation wasn't random. It was precise. Every person who left created room for something else to form. And this realization doesn't come immediately. It comes when you stop fighting the solitude and start listening within it. As this truth settles in, a deeper question begins to surface. What is God preparing you for that requires this level of refinement? That question is intentional because the answer unfolds gradually. Walking alone is not the destination, it is the corridor. It is the narrow passage between who you were and who you are meant to become. God removes people so you can pass through without being pulled backward. And once you understand this, you stop chasing explanations and start trusting timing. You realize that not every relationship ends because of conflict. Some end because the assignment is complete. Hold on to this, because the next truth will reveal why women who walk alone often carry a strength others don't recognize until much later. Truth, too, reveals something even deeper and more uncomfortable for most people to accept. God allows women who walk alone to experience separation because they are being trained to depend on inner authority, not external validation. This truth explains why, even when surrounded by people in the past, you may have still felt unseen, unheard, or emotionally unsupported. God knew that as long as affirmation came from outside, your confidence would remain fragile. So he slowly removes the voices you leaned on, not to weaken you, but to strengthen your discernment. When no one is there to approve your choices, applaud your growth, or reassure your fears, you are forced to listen inward. At first, this feels terrifying. Silence amplifies doubt. Solitude magnifies insecurity. But over time, something shifts. You begin to recognize your own voice. You start trusting your instincts without needing permission. And this is exactly the muscle God is developing, because the path ahead will require decisions others cannot make for you. Many women confuse loneliness with abandonment, but this truth reframes solitude as training. God isolates women who are meant to lead, influence, or carry spiritual weight, because reliance on others would eventually limit their obedience. If you constantly need agreement to move forward, you will hesitate when called to act alone. This is why God removes familiar emotional crutches. The people who once helped you feel safe are gently, or sometimes abruptly, taken out of the picture. And in that space, discomfort arises. Questions surface. Old fears resurface. But beneath all of it, something essential is forming. Self-trust, rooted in faith, not approval. The loneliness you feel is not a void, it is a classroom. Every quiet moment is teaching you how to stand without applause, how to move without consensus, and how to remain grounded when no one is watching. This training cannot happen in crowded rooms. As this process unfolds, many women notice an internal shift that feels subtle but powerful. You stop explaining yourself as much. You stop oversharing your plans. You stop seeking reassurance before every decision, not because you've become closed off, but because you've become anchored. God is teaching you that clarity does not require witnesses, purpose does not require popularity, and obedience does not require understanding from others. This is why some women feel misunderstood during this season. Their growth is quiet. Their strength is internal. Their transformation does not perform well in social settings. People may mislabel you as distant, cold, or arrogant, when in reality, you are learning discernment. God removes people so your confidence becomes internalized rather than borrowed. And once confidence comes from within, it cannot be taken away by rejection, silence, or loss. Another layer of this truth is emotional independence. Women who walk alone often discover that they were previously carrying emotional burdens that were never meant to be theirs. They absorbed others' moods, problems, and expectations, mistaking empathy for responsibility. God interrupts this pattern by removing proximity. When people leave, you are no longer managing their emotions, fixing their problems, or adjusting yourself to maintain harmony. At first, this feels like guilt. You wonder if you abandoned them. But over time, relief surfaces. Your energy stabilizes, your mind clears, your emotional world becomes quieter. This is not selfishness, it is alignment. God teaches you that love does not require self-erasure, and solitude is often the only environment where this lesson can be fully integrated without interference or manipulation. This truth also explains why women who walk alone often become emotionally resilient in ways others don't understand. They've learned how to sit with discomfort without running from it. They've learned how to self-regulate without distraction. They've learned how to pray, reflect, and process without needing immediate relief. This resilience is not accidental. God is preparing you for seasons where strength must be quiet and faith must be internal. Not every battle will be public. Not every challenge will come with support. Some assignments require you to stand firm even when misunderstood. And if you had not learned this in solitude, those future moments would overwhelm you. This is why God removes people before He reveals the full weight of your calling. As this truth settles, a realization emerges that changes how you interpret your past. You begin to see that every season of loneliness refined your inner compass. Every unanswered message strengthened your emotional boundaries. Every quiet night forced you to confront yourself honestly, and slowly you stopped abandoning yourself to maintain connection. This is the breakthrough most women miss while longing for companionship. God was not taking something away, He was giving something back to you, your intuition, your authority, your inner alignment. And once these are restored, you are no longer easily swayed by others' opinions or reactions. You become steady, grounded, clear. Hold on to this truth, because it directly connects to what comes next. Once a woman learns to stand without validation, something else begins to happen around her. The way people perceive her changes, the way energy responds to her presence shifts, and the next truth will reveal why women who walk alone often intimidate others without ever trying to. Truth 3 uncovers a reality most women only understand in hindsight. God allows women who walk alone to do so because their presence naturally exposes truth, and not everyone is ready to face what surfaces around them. This has nothing to do with arrogance, superiority, or intention. It is an energetic and spiritual effect. When a woman is deeply aligned with herself, honest with her inner world, and no longer performing for acceptance, she becomes a mirror. People see themselves more clearly in her presence, and clarity is uncomfortable for those who rely on distraction, denial, or emotional masks. This is why some people feel uneasy around women who walk alone. They can't quite explain it, but something feels confronting. God removes people not because the woman is doing something wrong, but because truth has a way of disrupting comfort. And comfort for many is more important than growth. Many women who walk alone notice a pattern throughout their lives. They are often the ones others confide in, yet rarely feel fully understood themselves. People open up around them, reveal secrets, insecurities, and hidden struggles, then later pull away. This happens because being seen is liberating at first, but frightening when it requires change. God understands this dynamic. He knows that not everyone who benefits from your clarity is willing to grow alongside it. So He creates distance to protect you from becoming an emotional dumping ground. Without separation, you would constantly absorb truths others refuse to act on. Over time, this would drain your energy and distort your purpose. God removes people so you are not punished for your depth. And here is the loop most women miss. The very honesty that attracts others initially is the same honesty that eventually pushes them away. Another layer of this truth is intimidation without intention. Women who walk alone often carry a quiet confidence that unsettles people who rely on external validation. You don't seek attention, yet you stand out. You don't demand respect, yet your presence commands it. This creates insecurity in those who measure worth through comparison, hierarchy, or control. They may label you as distant, unapproachable, or difficult, when in reality you are simply self-contained. God removes people who feel threatened by your self-possession because their insecurity would eventually pressure you to dim your light. And if you did, you would betray yourself to maintain peace. God refuses to let that happen, even if it costs you companionship in the short term. This truth also explains why conflict sometimes appears out of nowhere. You may notice that people become defensive, passive-aggressive, or critical without clear cause. Nothing changed on the surface, but something shifted internally. Your boundaries became firmer. Your tolerance for dishonesty decreased. Your willingness to participate in shallow dynamics faded. And that alone is enough to disrupt relational equilibrium. God allows these fractures to happen because forced harmony is not alignment. If a relationship can only exist when you minimize yourself, it is not sustainable. God removes those connections before resentment builds, before bitterness settles, and before you begin to question your own integrity to keep the peace. Walking alone also sharpens discernment. When distractions fade, you become more aware of subtle dynamics, unspoken tensions, and emotional undercurrents. You start sensing when something is off long before it becomes obvious. This sensitivity is a gift, but it requires protection. God removes people so your discernment does not become a burden. If everyone stayed, you would constantly feel responsible for what you perceive. Instead, solitude allows you to observe without absorbing. You learn when to engage and when to step back. This clarity is not meant to isolate you forever, but to refine your relational standards. Once you see clearly, you cannot unsee, and God will not allow you to go back to blindness for the sake of belonging. As this truth settles, many women experience a shift in how they view rejection. What once felt like being excluded now feels like being spared. You realize that not everyone who leaves does so because of misunderstanding. Some leave because they cannot remain in the presence of truth without changing. And change is a cost many are unwilling to pay. This realization brings a strange sense of peace. You stop chasing explanations. You stop trying to soften yourself. You stop apologizing for depth. God removes people so you can remain honest without carrying the weight of others' resistance. Keep this in mind as we move forward, because the next truth reveals why women who walk alone are often placed in seasons of delay, and how those delays are directly connected to divine protection rather than denial. Truth 4 reveals a pattern that often confuses women who walk alone. God allows seasons of delay and stillness because movement at the wrong time would expose you to the wrong people. Many women assume that isolation means they are falling behind, being overlooked, or missing opportunities. But in reality, God slows the pace intentionally to protect alignment. When you are evolving internally faster than your external circumstances, it creates a gap. That gap is not punishment, it is preparation. God understands that acceleration without discernment leads to attachment without wisdom. So he removes momentum before removing people, ensuring that when you do move forward, you do so with clarity rather than urgency. This is why women who walk alone often feel paused while others seem to progress. The stillness is not stagnation, it is filtration. During this season, impatience becomes the greatest test. You may feel ready, capable, and aware, yet nothing seems to open. Invitations don't arrive. Doors remain closed. Opportunities feel just out of reach. This is where many women mistake delay for denial. But God is observing how you respond when progress slows. Do you chase what is familiar out of loneliness? Or do you wait in faith? Do you compromise your standards to escape discomfort? Or do you honor what you've learned? God removes people and slows movement simultaneously because isolation without stillness would feel unbearable, and stillness without isolation would be distracting. Together, they create a sacred pause. In that pause, your motivations are purified. You stop moving to prove something and start moving with intention. Another layer of this truth is emotional safety. When God delays certain connections, He is protecting you from repeating old cycles. Growth without healing attracts the same dynamics in new forms. God understands that if you entered new relationships too soon, you would unconsciously recreate familiar patterns simply because they feel known. So He creates space between endings and beginnings. That space feels empty, but it is essential. In solitude, you become aware of your emotional habits, attachment styles, and coping mechanisms. You notice what you tolerate out of fear and what you desire out of alignment. God removes people so you can observe yourself without interference. Delay gives you time to integrate what you've learned, rather than rushing into something that looks different but feels the same. Walking alone during a season of delay also builds trust. Not trust in outcomes, but trust in guidance. When nothing external reassures you, you learn to lean inward and upward. You stop measuring progress by visibility and start recognizing growth by peace. This shift is subtle but transformative. Many women realize that during delayed seasons, their inner world becomes quieter, their reactions soften, and their priorities clarify. God is not withholding, He is recalibrating. He knows that the next phase of your life will require emotional stability, not urgency, and stability cannot be rushed. It must be built slowly, in environments that do not overwhelm or pressure you to perform. This truth also explains why women who walk alone often feel disconnected from timelines imposed by society. They stop comparing milestones, relationship statuses, or achievements. Delay breaks the illusion that life unfolds on a predictable schedule. God uses this disruption to detach you from external metrics of success. When you are no longer racing, you begin to listen. When you listen, you receive guidance that cannot be accessed in motion. This is why solitude and delay often coexist. God removes people so you are not pulled into other people's timelines. Your life is not late, it is aligned. As this understanding deepens, frustration gives way to reverence. You begin to sense that something is being guarded. Not just opportunities, but you. God delays access to you because not everyone deserves proximity to the version of you that is emerging. This reframes waiting as worthiness, not lack. You are not waiting because you are unready. Others are waiting because they are. God removes people and slows time to protect what is sacred, and sacred things are never rushed into environments that cannot sustain them. Hold this truth carefully because it leads directly into the next one. Once a woman learns to wait without bitterness and walk without company, her energy shifts. And the next truth reveals why, at that point, attraction becomes selective, intentional, and impossible to force. Truth 5 exposes a powerful shift that occurs once a woman has learned to walk alone without resentment. Her energy becomes selective, and not everyone can access her anymore. This is the moment many women don't realize they've crossed an internal threshold. Before, solitude felt imposed. Now, it feels intentional. God removes people until a woman no longer chases connection to fill emptiness, but chooses it from wholeness. This shift changes everything. You stop attracting through need and start attracting through alignment. And alignment is rare. When your energy stabilizes, it no longer responds to chaos, inconsistency, or emotional games. This is why, during this phase, connections become fewer but deeper. God is not limiting your life. He is refining it. Many women notice that once they reach this stage, the old dynamics no longer return, even when familiar people try to re-enter. Conversations feel off. Energies don't match. What once felt exciting now feels draining. This is not coldness, it is discernment. God removes people permanently when their role in your life has expired. And when your inner world is no longer chaotic, you can sense expiration without guilt. You no longer mistake attention for affection or intensity for intimacy. This clarity is not learned intellectually. It is earned emotionally through solitude. God had to remove people so your nervous system could reset. Without that reset, you would continue mistaking familiarity for safety. Another layer of this truth is magnetism without effort. Women who walk alone and integrate their solitude begin to attract without chasing. Not because they are trying, but because their energy is coherent. They know who they are, what they value, and what they will not tolerate. This coherence is felt before it is explained. People sense it, and while some are drawn to it, others feel blocked by it. God allows this polarity because it filters interactions before they begin. You no longer have to reject people actively. Your energy does it for you. This is protection in its most subtle form. God removes people not only by distance, but by misalignment that prevents access altogether. This phase often brings a surprising sense of peace mixed with clarity. You may spend more time alone, but you no longer feel lonely in the same way. Solitude becomes restorative rather than heavy. You enjoy your own presence. Silence feels full instead of empty. This is the moment many women realize they were never meant to be surrounded by many, but aligned with a few. God removes people so you can experience the difference. And once you do, you cannot go back to crowded connections that lack depth. Your standards are no longer rules you recite. They are boundaries you feel. This truth also explains why women who walk alone are often misunderstood during this stage. Others may interpret your selectivity as pride, distance, or emotional unavailability. But what they don't see is the work it took to get here. The nights of questioning, the seasons of silence, the discomfort of letting go. God does not expect everyone to understand your boundaries. He expects you to honor them, and honoring them requires strength, not explanation. When you stop over-explaining, you protect your energy. When you protect your energy, your life becomes quieter, but clearer. As this realization settles, a deeper awareness emerges. Not everyone who desires access to you deserves proximity. Wanting you is not the same as being aligned with you. God removes people who only want the version of you they can benefit from, and He allows those who are aligned to find you naturally, without force or pursuit. This is where patience pays off. You no longer fear being alone because you trust that what is meant to find you will do so at the right time in the right way. Remember this as we move into the next truth, because once a woman becomes selective without bitterness, something profound happens internally. The final attachments dissolve, and the next truth reveals why this detachment is essential before true fulfillment can arrive. Truth 6 reveals the moment when walking alone stops being a season and becomes an identity shift. God removes people so attachment can dissolve and obedience can deepen. At this stage, solitude is no longer about healing wounds or learning boundaries. It is about alignment with purpose. Many women reach this phase quietly. There is no announcement, no external validation, no visible milestone. Internally, however, something fundamental changes. You stop negotiating with fear. You stop delaying decisions because of emotional ties. You stop asking whether others will understand before moving forward. God removes people so nothing external can override the internal clarity He has cultivated within you. Attachment weakens obedience. Detachment strengthens it. This truth is uncomfortable because it challenges a deeply ingrained belief that connection is always the highest good. But God knows that certain callings cannot coexist with emotional dependency. If you are still attached to being liked, approved of, or needed, you will hesitate when obedience requires solitude. This is why women who walk alone often experience repeated cycles of separation. Each cycle removes another layer of attachment, not just to people, but to outcomes, identities, and expectations. God is not stripping your life. He is simplifying it. And simplicity creates focus. Focus creates power. Without this refinement, purpose becomes diluted by compromise. As this detachment deepens, many women experience a sense of emotional neutrality that can feel unfamiliar. You care, but you are not consumed. You love, but you are not entangled. You engage, but you are not dependent. This is not emotional numbness, it is emotional sovereignty. God removes people so your emotional state is no longer dictated by proximity or absence. You become steady, grounded, responsive, rather than reactive. This internal stability is essential because the next phase of your life will require you to stand firm when challenged, misunderstood, or tested. Without detachment, you would be pulled off course by every emotional wave. Another layer of this truth is obedience without explanation. Women who walk alone reach a point where they no longer feel the need to justify their choices. They move when called, pause when guided, and release when necessary. This quiet obedience often looks strange to others. It doesn't follow predictable logic. It doesn't align with social expectations. God removes people so you are not tempted to explain what cannot be explained yet. Some paths only make sense once you've walked them. And if too many voices were present, doubt would creep in. Solitude protects obedience from interference. This phase also brings a deep sense of spiritual intimacy. When distractions fade, connection deepens. Many women report that during this stage, their intuition sharpens, their prayers become more focused, and their sense of guidance feels clearer. God removes people so your attention is undivided. Not because relationships are unimportant, but because timing is. Certain instructions require silence to be heard. Certain transformations require privacy to unfold. This is why this stage often feels sacred. You become protective of your inner world, not out of fear, but out of reverence. As this truth integrates, a realization emerges that changes how you view everything that came before. You see that every goodbye, every pause, every season of isolation was guiding you toward this internal freedom. You are no longer attached to being understood. You're attached to being aligned. This shift brings peace that does not depend on circumstances. And with that peace comes readiness. Readiness for what is next, even if you cannot yet see it. Hold on to this, because the final truth reveals why, after all this separation, clarity, and detachment, connection returns in a form that does not threaten your purpose, but supports it. Truth 7 completes the picture and reveals why, after all the solitude, separation, and refinement, God allows connection to return in a completely different form. At this stage, walking alone has done its work. You are no longer seeking people to complete you, rescue you, or validate you. You are whole, aware, and anchored. This is precisely why connection becomes safe again. God removes people first, so that when He brings the right ones, they do not compete with your purpose, they support it. This truth explains why the return of connection feels calm rather than intense, steady rather than overwhelming. There is no rush, no confusion, no emotional highs followed by crashes. Instead, there is recognition. Alignment feels familiar, not exciting in a chaotic way, but grounding. God waited until your nervous system could handle peace before allowing closeness again. Many women expect reunion to look dramatic, but God's version of restoration is quiet. The people who enter your life after this stage do not demand constant access. They respect your rhythm. They do not question your boundaries because they recognize themselves within them. This is how you know the difference. Connection no longer pulls you away from yourself. It brings you back to yourself. God removes people so you can feel this contrast clearly. Without the memory of emotional exhaustion, you would not recognize emotional safety. Without the experience of walking alone, you would not value companionship that does not drain you. This truth closes the loop. Solitude was never the goal, discernment was. Another layer of this truth is shared direction. The connections that arrive after deep solitude are not random. They align with where you are going, not where you've been. Conversations feel purposeful. Silence feels comfortable. Growth feels mutual rather than one-sided. God waited until you no longer needed to convince, fix, or carry others before allowing these connections. This ensures that relationships enhance your life instead of consuming it. You move forward together, not in opposition, not in negotiation, not in emotional debt. This is why walking alone was necessary. It taught you how to walk beside someone without losing yourself. At this stage, fear of abandonment dissolves. You no longer cling because you trust alignment more than presence. You know that what is meant to stay will stay without force. God removes people so this trust can form. Once it does, attachment loosens and love becomes freer. You are no longer bracing for loss or scanning for signs of distance. You are present. This presence deepens connection in a way anxiety never could. And because you are no longer afraid of being alone, you choose connection consciously. That choice carries power. This truth also reframes your past completely. You no longer resent the seasons of isolation. You understand them. You see that every empty space was preparing you to recognize fullness. Every goodbye refined your discernment. Every quiet moment strengthened your foundation. God was not withholding love. He was protecting it. Protecting you from connections that would have fractured you before you were ready. Now, readiness is not something you question. It is something you feel. As this final truth settles, a calm confidence emerges. You no longer ask why God removed people from your life. You thank Him for it. You see that walking alone was not a sign of being forgotten, but of being guided. And when connection arrives now, it does not replace your strength, it meets it. This is the reward of walking alone with faith, relationships that arrive without cost to your soul, and a life that no longer needs to be crowded to feel complete. If this message spoke to you, don't let it end here. Like this video to strengthen this message, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what comes next, and leave a comment saying, "I walk with purpose," if you recognize yourself in this journey. Your interaction helps this truth reach other women who are still questioning why their path feels so solitary. And it reminds you that even when you walk alone, you are never without direction.